Welcome back to Stu Structures. We're here for video 8 in the series of building the coaling tower, so stay tuned. So welcome back to my channel. I'm Mark Stewart. I do appreciate you coming back and sharing this time with me. And we're here to continue on with the coaling tower, like I said. We're going to finally get around to working more on those coaling chutes on that other side of the building that I've been saying I'm going to do for the last couple of weeks. We have the doors to scratch build for that concrete building that we just about got completed last week. And I'm not sure what all we're going to get into, so let's just jump into this and see what we can get done this week. So like for the last couple of weeks, I've been promising to continue on with the coaling chutes on this side. So we're going to begin this week with working on some of the assemblies for this side. In that first picture, you really couldn't see a lot of this mechanism that's right above the coaling chute, and a lot of the pulleys and stuff go through that. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I took this picture here with the Pacific in it, and I blew up two different chutes. That gives me kind of an idea. And you can see there's kind of a triangle piece with a support beam that goes at a 45-degree angle up to the wall, and that's the main support system for this. Now all these cables, it's hard to see exactly how the door that lets the coaling out of the chute open and close, and I can see here the cables on the front of the chute. So anyway, we're going to start with that angle assembly and try to get that assembly mounted on the wall to begin with. And I went through all my plastics and I found this real small angle that I wish I'd had found before. So, and then some flat plate stock there as well. So, to make that lower piece of that bracket, I'm going to take this angle and cut it into what's one piece right here. But eventually it breaks when I try to, bend it in half. So I ended up just cutting 6 different pieces of these to make up 3 of the brackets. And you see the little square piece down there below. And what I did is just bend that to a 90-degree and glue it, and then glue that square up inside of it to give it some extra support. Because like I said, this just wants to break on what's left of that corner. And after I get those, there are flat plates on the back of that steel where it mounts to the wall. So, I went ahead and cut these plates for that. And those little tiny squares that you saw there, I'm going to cut into, diagonally across the squares and make these tiny little triangles. And what I'm going to do with those is where the plate that mounts to the wall on the back of that, I'm going to come through and put these little triangle pieces and glue them into place back down underneath there. Because I just don't think that there's enough adhesion area for the glue where this plate meets that steel. And with that extra little triangle in there, it gives it a whole lot more area for the glue to mold this together and give me something really decent and solid that isn't going to fall apart. So I just come through and mount all those plates on all 3 of those, and that's basically the lower part of that assembly together. Now next, there's that angle piece that goes up to the wall. And I tried to use this angle originally and bend this end to where I could glue it down onto the point of that, and that just really wasn't going to work. So I found this flat plate, and I cut 45, kind of a house top on the end of it. And bent that up to a 45-degree and then glued that on the end of the angles down there. So this gives me my upright brace where it connects down there as well. And then I cut 3 of these tiny little round dowels, and I'm going to just mount those on top where I glued that onto these to look like some type of a bolt system or a way of that connected all this together. And once I get that glued into place, then I have, that lower part of that together. Now the top side would have mounted to the wall with plates the way this lower angle system that I built did. So I go ahead and cut the 4 plates for that upper area where it meets the wall as well. And once I get that angle and that upper plate on that, this is the upper part of the assembly is pretty much done that would mount to the wall itself. Now underneath of that, there's another assembly that will attach to all that, but basically that's, this part of it is put together at this point. And this is a little bulky, but I think once I've mounted on the building, I think it'll look okay, and I just need to get black paint on it and make it look better too. Now the lower assembly basically has 3 small I-beams that hang underneath of that point out there. And this is the assembly that raises and lowers the chute door that allows the coal to go down the chute. And in the center of that, this would have connected to, underneath that point of that triangle. So I'm adding this little piece underneath there to attach that to that. Now this really would have hung with chain at the time, and I need various eye hooks and various pulleys and things like that to make this work. On the back side of this there was a pulley because there was a cable that came through this from the door to a permanent place on the platform that goes between the chutes. So I take this and mount the pulley system on the end of each one of those, and that's the first step in this process. And on the other end of that, there would have just been an eyelet that a cable came to, and tied off permanently on the other end of this. So I just cut an eyelet off of one of these pulley systems and go ahead and glue that on the other end of these, and that's pretty much done. Now I have to use some eyelets and some chains, and the chain I found here, which is really, really small. That center round dowel that I was going to use connect this beam to that triangle piece, it's in the wrong place and it just isn't going to work quite right. So I found this small chain and I'm just cutting 3 length sections, and this is more like working an N scale here. This stuff is just tiny. But once I get those chains glued into place under those I-beams, I come back and put black paint on all those assemblies and the upper assembly as well that I'm going to attach these to, except for where the glue mounts these 2 assemblies together. And then I come back and mount those assemblies together underneath with CA glue, because the chain's metal and I'm gluing it to plastic. And once that whole assembly's done, I touch up the black paint on it and I come back and glue those into place. And that's that whole assembly built and in place for each of the 3 coaling chutes. Now, I talked about, having to raise these chutes because I glued them too low. So here I'm coming back with just some of that vinyl spackle and just smoothing out the area where I ripped up before so I can come back and paint that. Now, the chute has several things that I need to add to it to make it right as well. And these are tiny little eyelets, and the cables that came down to this chute would have been on the 2 front corners of this chute. So that I had to mount these little eyelets on all the corners of the fronts of the chutes. And the next assembly, where the door is that raises and lowers for the coal to actually enter the chute, there's actually an assembly attached to it. And on either side of that assembly, there's these 2 rods that come up to a flat plate. And in the center of on the center of the flat plate, there's another eyelet. So, I cut some flat stock and just go ahead and mount one of those eyelets to the center of that as well. And then I come back and glue that to either side of those little dowels that came up from the top of that door. And here they've got paint on them, so it makes it hard to see, but you can see that little chute, and it has that little assembly right above it that comes up to that eyelet, and then a cable would have attached to that eyelet to raise and lower the door that actually opened the chute. Now this was raised, the chute door was actually raised automatically by the raising and lowering of the chute itself. And this was done with cables that were attached back further on the chute itself. So I'm attaching these eyelets back here on the back end of this chute so I can attach the cable assemblies to later on and do all that. Now I'm going to backtrack to last week's video, and we had started working on this building, and the basic parts of the building were pretty much done, but we have the doors and stuff to work on for this. And you can't see the door on the back side of this, so I'm just going to make a basic flat wooden door. And the doors look like they attach to the outside of the building and not inset into the concrete. So I just go through my scrap wood box and I find a couple of pieces of balsa wood that'll work for the doors. And I get the measurements off that blueprint I had, and I cut basically I'm starting with the double door at the one end. So I'm cutting the two doors from that. And I'm going to slightly angle the one edge where the two doors meet together so it'll kind of look like it has a seam in the middle of it. Now I need to put some bracing behind these that will set back in between the concrete walls and help me glue this into place. So I'm just going to use this Titebond glue, and I'm going to glue two wooden supports that cross between both doors behind them and glue those into place to hold the doors together. And once I do that, it's a good solid assembly that'll set right back in that hole. And I'm going to trim the top of the one door because you see there's just a slight difference in height in the two doors on this as well. And then to make it look like these are just upright wooden boards that make up this door, I'm just going to use the back edge of a blade, and I'm going to use a ruler and scratch board lines into these boards. And these were hinged to the outside, so I'm going to come back and cut some wooden dowel parts here, and I'm going to make three hinges on each side of the door. So I glue those into place about where they would have been, and then I have my hinges, at least the part that would show, on the doors. Now the other thing, there would have been handles and I don't know, some kind of a lock assembly or something. I'm not sure, I can't really tell from the pictures, but I'm going to make tiny little handles. So I get a piece of wooden dowel and I cut two little tiny pieces to put on the upper and lower sides of the handle so that it sits out just a slight bit from the door. And once I do that, I basically have my handles. And now I came back and put brass paint on these and painted the door black. I got to do another coat to get down in the cracks, but the brass is just a little too brassy looking to me, so I think I'm going to come back and use gold paint and paint these later on. But after I grew my handles onto the door, basically I have my doors ready to glue into place other than repainting everything to a gold color. So I come through and just glue those onto the outside of the building, and I have my two doors in place. Now on the other end there was just a small single door, so I just basically made the door the same way and scratched the things into it. And you can just use a pin for a door handle on this end, but basically I just glued that into place. And there you have this week's segment of building the coaling tower. I got a fair amount done this week. I mean, it doesn't look like it on tape, but it took a whole lot of time to figure out how. And I started building all those three small structures that raise and lower the chute opening door. And the pictures aren't real plain on that. This is kind of close to probably how it worked. But I really don't have a great example of how it worked, and we still have to do the rigging on it, which we'll do in the next adventure next week. And it is probably just a little oversized. I'm not sure if it was angle or flat plate or, I built what I thought was probably structurally a sound structure to make it work right. I know the I-beam underneath of that is a little larger than obviously what was in the picture. And I don't have all the right pulleys and all that kind of stuff, so I kind of improvised with a lot of what I did. But basically, this would probably have worked. There's lots of times I make things up just to, make it look like something's there and that something's going on. But I do like, if I can, to make it look like it probably would have been functional and could have worked this way when it's built. And, that's what I tried to do with this. I think it's okay. I mean, the building came along well. I'm glad I have that in place because we're going to be starting all the walkways and stuff down around the building and platforms here before too long. And, I needed to have that ready because it does land on the roof of that building before it comes onto the ground. Although, the more and more I look at that brass that I painted on the hinges and the door handles, to me it looks more like bronze than brass. And I think gold would be a better color to make it look like the brass ones that probably would have been on there. So I'm going to change that and repaint those to gold. But all in all, the structure turned out okay. And, it's just a support structure. It's not the main structure. Not that my main structure is exact and perfect either, but, I think once it gets all the detail on there, I think it's going to be a real nice looking building. And, it was just a major part of the center of the yard in Grafton. I mean, all the locomotives coming across from the east across the mountains landed down here in Grafton. Then from here to all points west and north, they changed locomotives here. And there was also a lot of helpers that started here that went to M&K Junction that pushed trains east. So this whole yard that I'm building really was just an engine facility. I mean, it had 120 foot, well, it was 115 foot round table with it. I think when it comes down to it, I'm probably going to have to do a 120. I don't want to scratch build the turntable, and you can't get, I have seen one 115 foot round table, and it was just way too expensive. It was some European model. Although it did look pretty correct for what I need, I may end up scratch building it. But as wide as this yard was downtown, and if I do the control tower and the freight house and the water tower and the B&O hotel and station, the new one, the big brick building, the Willard Hotel down at the other end of the thing, and then come down and do the yard in front of that, to come on across down at the other end and add the round table and the roundhouse will make this thing so wide that it's almost going to be impossible to reach the tracks in the center. This was a full half roundhouse, and across the length of the half side of it is about 6 foot in HO scale. This is just a huge building. So, I guess I've got time to debate whether I want to do that or not. On that same side of the tracks was a foundry, which was a stone building, and it was one of the earliest buildings still surviving till a few years ago on here. When the railroad got to this point, they built this foundry, and this is where they made all the steel for all the bridges going south into the area that I model, and on east to the Ohio River and onto Wheeling as well. There's basically 3 branches that kind of left here from Grafton going west and north and south. And then the other one went east to Cumberland. And the yard to the east end of this, which you've seen me model a few of the buildings for that yard, was just a massive yard. And I'm not sure, I may end up doing a condensed version of that yard on the layout as well. But my main focus has been this engine facility because it was just a huge structure, or a facility, not a structure, that contained many structures. And then there was the powerhouse too, which was, it was huge, big brick, 2-stall building, and I think it was 120, 130 foot coaling tower that went up, and smoke stack, I guess is the term I should use. So anyway, I don't know how much of that on that side of that track I'm gonna do for my thing. Layout when I get it. I guess some of that'll depend on the room that I end up with to do this in as well. I'm considering, once I have property, building my own structure to put all this in and be able to do it the way I want to do it. But anyway, with all that said, I'm rambling on a little here longer than I need to be rambling. So, the whole point to all this, and I say this every week, get some stuff out and scratch build something. I mean, I'll put a challenge out there, scratch build something, film it and put it out there on YouTube. Let's all see, your techniques. I mean, I like learning just the same as the next person, and you know, even people that are doing something minor will do something that I've never seen done before. And you learn from anybody and everybody. And sometimes I say, you know, by watching maybe you learn how not to do some things. You know, I've done that watching some other people too, and not that necessarily what they did it worked for them, but I can think of a better way for me to do it. You know, and that's what's all about. It's just having fun. You know, and I enjoy building things that nobody else is going to have on their layout. And this yard's going to look pretty much historically correct. I mean, anybody that comes into this that knew Grafton back in the day is going to say, wow, man, that's Grafton, you know? And to me, that's what it's all about, the flavor of, I always say. In any case, the whole point to all that was drag out some trains, run some trains if you're not going to scratch build, but try scratch build something, even if it's something small, you know, a telephone pole, whatever, you know? And just enjoy the hobby. Happy model railroad.